Okay. You ready? Let's do this. You're listening to Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. This is the podcast that delves deep into the outdoors, will inspire, inform, and get you stoked to explore. And I'm your host, David Webb. Welcome to episode 37 of Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. I'm David Webb. I love domestic travel. Don't get me wrong, I also like to get my passport stamped. But there's something fun and cool about spending your vacation time locally or regionally. It's fun because you don't waste your days off traveling or recovering from jet lag. It's cool because you can buck travel trends and mainstays for off-the-beaten-track destinations that offer exceptional experiences, often without super premium price tags or other tourist trap stuff you gotta deal with sometimes. My home province of British Columbia is blessed with an abundance of awesome outdoorsy destinations. From the world-renowned like Whistler or Tofino to regional faves like Golden or Kelowna and more. Revelstoke, Penticton, Victoria, so many of these names will be familiar to you. I've recently discovered, or should I say rediscovered, a place in BC that offers quiet trails, serene lakes, epic snowfall, and all the other things that make our outdoors amazing. Plus, there's ample places to stay, it's easy to get to, and the prices are low. And it's a hiding right in plain sight. Have you considered Prince George? Yes, really. Today, my guest is Colin Carson, CEO of Tourism Prince George, and he's about to blow your mind and reintroduce you to the BC city you thought you knew. All right, Colin Carson, welcome to Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. How are you doing today?
Excellent, David. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure, my pleasure. For our listeners, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Colin Carson. I'm the CEO at Tourism Prince George. So we're a destination marketing organization responsible for attracting visitors to Prince George, British Columbia. A community of about 80,000 people, located right in the center of the province, but definitely kind of seen as northern BC.
The start of northern BC in a lot of ways, the gateway to northern BC, right?
Or, I mean, as we like to consider ourselves, the base camp to the north as well. I think that's
the base camp. Yeah, I really like that. So, Tourism Prince George, what do you do? What is the vision of Tourism Prince George?
Yeah, I mean, really, we're all about, as a destination marketing organization, we're really just attracting people to Prince George, trying to get them here, trying to get them to stay here longer if they're already here, and ultimately spend money in the community. That's what we want to be doing. Contributing to that local economy here from the tourism lens is what we're all about. I think when we kind of step back and talk about the vision of the organization, though, we want to make sure we're doing that ethically, responsibly, attracting the right kinds of travelers. And I mean, really, if you look at our vision, like base camp to the north is right there. We definitely, we're all about Prince George. That's what we do. But we know that when people are traveling, a big part of their trips up to northern BC include Prince George and elsewhere. They're not typically coming to Prince George for a week's holiday. They're doing a big road trip all throughout northern BC. So that gateway to the north is really something that we are striving towards. And, if something else is happening in northern BC, it's going to benefit our community. So, we really want to see that growth as well.
That's awesome. You seem very passionate about that. Are you a longtime Prince George resident?
Yeah, born and raised.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely, it's one of those things that I think, like anyone, if you grow up in a smallish town and you think when you're graduating high school, I'm out of here and I'm never coming back. And truthfully, I did. I left for university and I was gone for about 7 years. Did a few things overseas as well, and found my way back to Prince George and was like, wow, it's great here. I love it. No wonder why so many people choose to make their homes here. And one of those things I think you always. Growing up somewhere, you always kind of view it in a different lens, but it's a fantastic place to live. I've got young kids now to raise a family, so really enjoy my time here in Prince George.
When you came back, what was it that connected that maybe hadn't before?
Yeah, good question. I think that I've always been passionate about the outdoors and loving doing things outdoors, but I think that's something that I probably took for granted in a younger age. And then coming back to Prince George in about 2016, really just having that access to the outdoors was something that was just so great and really liked doing in my mid-20s, getting outside, getting outdoors as much as I can, whether that's in the winter cross country skiing and doing things like that, or in the summer just hiking and mountain biking as well. So I think that's something that I definitely took for granted when I was a kid, but now so thankful for all the outdoor recreation opportunities we do have in Prince George.
We have listeners coast to coast in Canada and some abroad too. I know people in BC where we know where Prince George is, but a lot of us see it more as a dot on a map than maybe somewhere we went to yesterday.
Mhm.
How big is it? Tell us about the city.
Yeah, so we were about 80,000 people in city limits,
Yeah.
75 to 80,000, and then close to 100,000 when you kind of talk about the greater Prince George area and outskirts. So it's a decent sized city. I think what's kind of unique about us from a tourism lens is we have a lot more infrastructure than a typical city of that size. And that's because we are a large service center for northern BC.
Mm.
People coming from, as far as Prince Rupert, which is 750 kilometers away for weekend for shopping, people using medical infrastructure and things like that from nearby communities. So a lot of the things that we have to offer in Prince George are more than what you would typically expect for a community our size. And from the tourism lens, our arena facilities, our sport field facilities for sport tourism opportunities are huge and pack a punch for communities our size, as well as our conferences for that business travel, that size of the tourism lens as well. We have a lot of opportunities to attract and promote those types of events, and we do a really good job in Prince George of doing those types of events and securing them and hosting them.
At the same time, though, at 100,000, I mean, if you amalgamated the Lower Mainland, so we're not going to break up all the municipalities. Say there's one a greater Metro Vancouver area, you've got to be probably in the top 5 biggest cities in the province, though, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the
Yeah.
interesting things with Prince George is the growth has slowed compared to a lot of other places in BC.
Hmm.
There was a point where we were the second or third biggest city in
Hmm.
BC. And in the 80s and 90s with the forestry boom, we were projecting to be one of the biggest centers in BC. And definitely now that's changed a little bit. Our growth hasn't quite gone up with into pace with other places within BC and Western Canada, but we still are a growing community and definitely still a relatively big size community when
Hmm.
comparing us to other communities in BC for sure.
You mentioned, the access to the outdoors, the hiking, mountain biking, camping, things like that. This is what our listeners do. This is what the readers of the magazine do. You're also sort of speaking BC's language there. So when you think, okay, mountain biking, hiking, camping, canoe trips, how does Prince George differentiate itself from other typical outdoorsy destinations in the province or in Canada?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll try to say this without bashing any of our other communities in Canada and BC. No, I think what's great about Prince George is actually kind of goes back to that question we were just talking about. It's the size of the community. So we've got
Mm.
3 fantastic mountain bike facilities, mountain bike trail networks within 20 minutes of town. We've got access to 1,600 lakes, rivers, and creeks within 100 kilometers radius of Prince George. It's the proximity of everything I think that is
Mm.
really unique about Prince George and the ability to access. So, we often, one of the places we talk about where if you're a mountain biker, someplace to go in the summers, and then in the winter, it's one of the biggest cross-country ski clubs in Canada is the Caledonia Nordic Ski Club. It's about 15 minutes from downtown Prince George to get to that facility. And, nowhere else in Canada are there really facilities like that close to, 2,000-ish hotel rooms. So, that
Right.
opportunity to kind of be, at your hotel and 15 minutes later you're already on a trail is pretty special and pretty unique to Prince George. So I think that's a big piece of it that we really like to talk about is that still that small town feel where you're close to access to all of these things. The other piece of it, which is an interesting point, and I think maybe we're trying to change a little bit, honestly, about Prince George, but the amount of visitors and locals that we have here is just significantly less. That population base is significantly less. So you can go out onto these trails, and even if they're within city limits, and they're gorgeous, beautifully maintained trails that are phenomenal, you might not see another person. And I think that's pretty special to when you're comparing yourself to these other destinations that are, I would say suffering from certain angles of over tourism and, having problems handling the numbers of visitors that are coming to communities. That's not an issue we're dealing with now. And we're very aware we don't want to ever get to that point, but that's one of those things that's great about Prince George too. When you get out there on a trail, you feel like you're in nature. You don't feel like you're surrounded by other people. You can be isolated, you can be alone, and it's pretty special to do that.
Empty trails, lonely lakes. Is that because visitation is not as high as some other destinations, or is it because of the size of what you're offering, or both?
It's probably a combination of both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I mentioned, like there's 1,600 lakes, rivers, and creeks within 100 kilometers. So if you go to a lake and it's busy, go 5 minutes, you'll find another one. And that one might not be busy. So I think that, I would say that there's pockets of places that definitely attract more people, but there's always other opportunities where there's going to be quiet areas. And to the other side of that, like we truly are still a growing destination from a visitor perspective. So there are less visitors here than you would see in other communities and in other, popular outdoor recreation areas. So there's definitely both sides to that coin.
You mentioned 2,000 hotel rooms. That's certainly interesting because I know some other regions in BC, regions in Alberta, some small towns in northern Ontario, things like that. They wouldn't have anything even in the ballpark of that, like not even, a country mile from that. So that's really fascinating to think that you could handle a lot of visitors without being overrun because of the size of the place we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think kind of back to that point of Prince George being this service hub is this hotel base is, pretty well maintained through these other non-traditional tourists. But the nice thing is that also means there's potentially a little bit more capacity during the typical high seasons for other destinations. So, if you were coming to Prince George in the summer months, where even nearby communities that are extremely popular tourist destinations, you might not be able to find a hotel room, or you might be paying an absolute premium. That swing isn't necessarily happening as much here in Prince George. So I think that's kind of an exciting thing that we like to talk about too, is that affordability still to travel here, maybe compared to some other destinations. So yeah, the hotel partners in Prince George are fantastic, and we love working with them. And there's a wide variety of different selections and choices to kind of meet anyone's sorts of needs. So it's a pretty great base that we can definitely build upon.
Affordability. Everyone likes to hear that word. We know these classic resort towns, classic mountain towns that are so fantastic. Again, much like you just said, I don't want to get in the habit of bashing anyone's offering or anything like that. Beautiful places everywhere. But as they become more popular, there's the scarcity issue, and we know what happens when there's scarcity is the price goes up. So I do love to hear that. When I think of places in BC particularly, I think of, say, Tofino. You got the beaches, surf culture, that vibe. Maybe Kelowna, where you're talking, wine tours, lake life. Who is a Prince George visitor? Who do you speak to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's really interesting is maybe we don't have that typical visitor, which is it definitely can be challenging at times as a destination marketing organization. We love if we could, speak to one type of person and focus on them and attract them all the time. But I think what's really kind of unique about Prince George is we have a wide variety of abundance of different offerings and not really a specialty in any one given thing. So, if you're a mountain biker, for example, like you're going to find some fantastic mountain biking trails and opportunities in Prince George. If you're looking to do your lifetime mountain bike trip, you're probably not choosing Prince George, but there's that opportunity where you can do that. And, you can do all sorts of different things around that and with that as well. So I think that, the visitor that we really talk about is often we're looking at families that are looking at different sorts of interests as well. So, maybe, one of the sides of the families is looking for some of that outdoor recreation, while the other side, they actually just want to spend a day shopping in a urban setting. Well, you can do both in Prince George, and I think that's what's really great is we can offer that. Again, it has its challenges probably doing it that way, but it provides a lot of opportunity. And again, back to that point where if there are slow periods for different reasons, we can try to attract visitors for other reasons as well. And then I think the other piece of this that we always talk about, and I mentioned our fantastic facilities, we really see ourselves as an event-based community as well. Do a
Okay.
really good job attracting concerts, conferences, sport events. So things like that, lots of visitors coming for those events. And then, hopefully they're partaking in other activities while they're here as well. But that would be another, primary sort of target market that we're looking at is just those event visitors as well.
Right. So what kind of events? What are some of your key annual events?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of annual ones, we've got a large like a BC. It's called the BC Northern Exhibition. It's a fair that
Right.
happens every summer, and it's over 100 years old. It's got the classic carnival rides along with like the outdoor Western agriculture side of things, where you can see the horses and all the animals. So that's a fantastic one in the summer months. We've got massive conferences every year, like the BC Natural Resource Forum, that focuses on like the resource industry and 1,000+ delegates every year coming to Prince George for that. And then in terms of sport events, maybe not so many annual ones, but we really do a good job of attracting world-class events. In the last couple of years, we've hosted the World Women's Curling Championships. We've hosted the World Para-Nordic Skiing Championships and Biathlon World Cup Finals. So those winter sports obviously is where we tend to thrive, but lots of different events happening all the time in Prince George.
Winter sports, that really piqued my interest there because I live in Vancouver, so we have the mountains or whatever, but Prince George, you're going to get winter up there, right? So what are your tourism seasons? Are you focused on winter at all, or are you looking more of a spring, summer, fall? How do you position yourself there?
Yeah, well, what I think's like great about where we're at as a destination is we still have a little bit of capacity in all seasons, so we can focus kind of anywhere and highlight anything. We still do see some slower seasons in the winter and in the shoulder seasons. So that's something we're always trying to attract visitors in those times. But we do have capacity year round. And that's great about, whether it's hosting, summer events that other communities might not want to host because they don't need to attract more visitors in the summer. That's something that we can jump at and still host a great event in the summer months. So I think that's one of those things where I wouldn't say we focus on any particular season or time of year. But we definitely, I mean, we do definitely do on different campaigns, but overall we're happy to attract visitors whenever.
Do you find people coming to the events for a conference, say, or a concert or the curling championships, and then they later come back as visitors just because they liked what they saw? Do you have data on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, David, and we're trying to get more data on that. And right now, as we're speaking, we're in the process of opening a new visitor information center. And our board of directors, really took a look at these trends in visitor services and wanted to position ourselves in the best ability to impact that traveler that's already in Prince George and hopefully, again, get them to spend money while they're here, but maybe attract them to come back. So we are in the process of moving the visitor information center to the conference center. And I think that's exactly what you talked about there. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, and I'm guilty of this too. When I go visit communities for conferences and for meetings, sometimes I don't leave the hotel where the conference is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Back to the airport and back, and that's all I do. So hopefully we're hoping that if the visitor center is on site there, we can encourage those delegates that are here to, not only try the local restaurants, try something local while they are here, but give them that information, give them that sense of what they're missing. Maybe if they're at a conference here in the winter and, we can talk about all the great things that we offer in the summer months, that might just be something that resonates with them and they'll think about coming back here as a leisure traveler instead of as a business traveler. So definitely not something we have a lot of data on right now, but definitely something we know there's an opportunity for, and we're shifting to do that right now.
Some of the things I've been asking you, I've been picturing interprovincial travel, maybe Western Canada, within BC. Do you have an international travel component that seeks out Prince George as a way to access the north or even just the area around it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like many places in Western Canada and BC specifically, people from international markets want to visit this area. When they're typically coming to Prince George, again, it's like I mentioned earlier, we're not typically getting those international visitors coming specifically to Prince George only for Prince George. They're coming to northern BC to do the Great Northern Circle route, or they're driving up to Alaska, or they're, going west to see the Salmon Glacier in Stewart, BC. They're doing these longer trips that take them through Prince George. So definitely we do have that international market. And that's where, when we go to trade shows and promote Prince George, we very rarely promote Prince George as the only destination. We're always working with Northern BC, with other communities to package that entire piece together for these international visitors, because we know that's what's interested in them, and that is what they're interested in. And we know that those international visitors tend to spend more money. And I mean, obviously generalizing a little bit, but the further away that you come from tends to be the more money you're going to spend in a destination.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
those types of travelers are definitely good for the region and for Prince George. So always working at trying to identify ways to attract more of those. One of the interesting opportunities in Prince George, and this is, still not quite the demand for anything too significant yet, but Prince George actually has an international airport. We have direct flights, have had direct flights to different areas in the United States, have had direct flights to different areas in Mexico, and typically that's the Prince George or Northern BC traveler, going to Puerto Vallarta in the winter,
Right.
rather than us attracting those back. But that opportunity is definitely there if we can continue to build. There is the opportunity for international flights to come direct to Prince George.
How does that work when you're working with other communities? Say, you want to partner with, I don't know, Smithers, Dawson Creek, Fort Nelson. How do you work together with these communities to make sure everyone's benefiting and that you're all going to see a lift from working together?
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, and sometimes there's certain communities that want to be involved in certain campaigns and others that want to be involved in only other ones. So it definitely is delicate. And as Prince George, as kind of the hub for Northern BC, and no matter which way you're getting to Alaska or getting to the Yukon, you kind of have to go through Prince George. So, we kind of tend to see the benefit no matter what's happening. So we're happy to partner with any community on any sort of initiative. But some of the things that we've been really successful on, in different areas throughout Northern BC, are motorcycle travel specifically. So we have a marketing campaign called Route 16, where we highlight travel opportunities along Highway 16 from Mount Robson, essentially in the east, all the way to Prince Rupert in the west. And, that's been a really successful marketing campaign for the last probably 7 years. The Go North RV camping campaigns that we have are really successful, and other communities that might not be fitting with motorcycle travel might see more benefit in the camping side of things. So always trying to find something that might make sense for communities to work with. But we're really fortunate, I think, in the north, with the communities. They often are willing to be part of that bigger picture and work together. The other thing we have going for us is we have a great regional destination management organization in Northern BC Tourism that really
Right.
facilitates a lot of that as well. So, we're really fortunate to be able to work with them, and kind of help pull this all together to make the North as strong as we can.
You mentioned before, and we've been talking about all the outdoor recreational pursuits, and we talked about all the hotel rooms and the venues and the services and resources that you have as a larger community, as well as mixing that often hard to find mix of tons of hotel rooms, city amenities, and tranquil trails. But when you're looking at, say you're at a trade show and you're talking to people going booth to booth, and they say went to, they looked at ski resorts in the Powder Highway in the Kootenays, or they looked at the Okanagan for mountain biking. I mean, what do you say to them? What's the environment like in Prince George that would be different than in the Okanagan? Or what's what do the ski hills offer that would be different than something you might find in Revelstoke?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think it's funny to say this when we're talking about ski communities, because I think this is the general sort of vibe for all of them. But I feel like it's more of a laid back approach in Prince George.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily what everyone is doing. They're not all here to mountain bike. So for that aspect, like, it's just a little bit kind of more laid back, a little bit more easygoing is a lot of what we are tend to saying to these individuals. I think the other thing that's really interesting, sort of when we talk about this, is people tend to not consider Northern BC in a lot of aspects for these things. Often that's our sales pitch, is like, well, have you tried it? And they're like, well, no, actually. We love going to the Kootenays to ski. We love going to the Okanagan to mountain bike. Well, you should try the North. And they're like, actually, yeah, I probably should. Like, we travel over BC. Why haven't we tried the North? So often that's kind of one of our sales pitches as well. It's like, hey, like, you should try us, and you won't be disappointed. I think on the mountain bike side, we talked a lot about, Prince George has 3 very unique trail networks right within the city. There's great mountain biking all over Northern BC. Skiing's a little bit trickier. We have a really great local community hill within city limits. There's another hill about an hour away from Prince George, and then Powder King Resort is close to 2 hours away. That's gets the most snowfall in Canada typically on a year-to-year basis. So that's always a nice selling feature as well. But I think that the challenge on that side of things is often they're a little bit further away from the communities than we'd like, anyways. Especially here in Prince George.
Powder King. It's funny you mentioned that. I've skied my whole life, and I've never skied Powder King before, and it's always been in the back of my mind to get up to ski Powder King just because of the stats alone on the incredible snowfall. But it doesn't seem to be even close to top of mind when people think of ski hills. And I would like to help change that a little bit anyway, because I think also what you touched on earlier was responsible tourism and making sure this growth benefits the community and is done so in a way that doesn't displace longtime residents and things like that. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, we talk about trying to find the right traveler and who is that person we want to attract to Prince George. And I think that's the type of person that we want, these people that want the authentic local experiences, that they want to come here to eat in the locally owned restaurants, that get their meat from the farm just outside of Prince George, and they, serve the local beer on tap, and they get their wine from the local winery here. Like, that's the type of traveler we want, is the type of person that wants to experience local. And I think that's something that, from a responsible traveler, like we want everyone to have a good experience in Prince George, but we want to make sure that these people are, being respectful as they're in our community and treating it as we would want it to be treated. So I think that, it's a lot of that marketing materials trying to find the right person and appeal to the type of traveler that we want to have here. And then also, I think, trying to educate those visitors that are here. And we do that through a variety of different channels, whether it's at the visitor center, whether that's some training we provide frontline workers in hotels and attractions within Prince George. But, making sure that, they're telling people, hey, yeah, I see you're traveling with a dog. That's fantastic. That area you can't bring dogs into that area. Things like that, just to be respectful. I think that there in certain communities, there's conflict between locals and visitors. And, we're very fortunate right now that that's not happening in Prince George. And we want to make sure that doesn't start to happen, because that's when the industry as a whole kind of has a negative connotation to it. And, that really hurts us as an organization and the work that we're trying to do within our community. So, it's a balancing act for sure. You want to bring as many dollars as you can into the community, but you need to have that long-term vision to make sure you're doing it appropriately, or else it's all short-term gain, and then you're going to hurt in the long run if you're not going about it the right way.
In Vancouver, and thinking about communities within a few hours drive of Vancouver or a few hours drive of, say, Calgary, I know these are major issues, skyrocketing housing prices, places like Squamish or Canmore or even Golden, because of the influx of urban travelers who often then become weekend homeowners or telecommuters even. I wonder if Prince George has like a geographic protection around that, in that, a place like Powder King, you just said, well, is it going to get overrun if it's 2 hours north of Prince George? I mean, maybe that's your X factor right there, that you're going to have that a constant buffer zone that's going to preserve that character.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting thought. And part of me, as wanting to grow the industry within Prince George, sometimes I wish we were closer to those major centers, so it would be easier for people to come here. But I really think, in the travel industry and the tourism industry, we talk about this authentic experience. And I think the fact that we are, so far away from these major centers, as people view it a lot of times, and isolated, if you want to call it that, which you can take that connotation however you want. I think that is something kind of unique that we offer, and probably something that's really appealing to a certain type of visitor. And, we talked a little bit earlier about international visitors, and, we don't see the same international visitors that are going into Vancouver and Victoria every year. We see a lot of German travelers, a lot of British and travelers from the UK that are looking for that outdoor experience that is a little bit off the beaten track, that isn't going to be overrun with other visitors, and is something, more authentic that they can go back and tell their friends about, like, yeah, well, I did this. And, everyone's been to Vancouver, but guess where we went in northern BC, and you wouldn't believe this. So, there's definitely this kind of pull and push trying to figure out exactly where we fit with that. But that geographic challenges that may exist for us because we're located further away definitely is an advantage in a lot of ways as well. So it's about trying to find that balance too. We want to make sure that we're constantly growing and looking for the right visitors, but doing it properly. And yeah, the geography is always an interesting conversation on that.
The right visitors. You've said that a number of times, and I think I know what you're getting at. But oftentimes, I feel the right visitors are the ones that sort of blend with the community that's already there. That really they align in terms of values and vibes and expectations. So, what is the community there? You know, it's a big enough city that it's a city, no doubt about that. But tell me about the people. Tell me about what you might find when you came there and strolled downtown, went to a cafe.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the vibes of the community is something that Prince George has gone through many iterations of. And if you're coming from another community and you're walking around town, you will be shocked how many pickup trucks there are, because that's typical in Prince George. And quite frankly, not a necessity in the winter, but that's something that people have trucks in Prince George. So there's a certain aspect of that. And I think that's been shifting. You'll see more electric vehicles, you'll see things like this. The one thing that I think hasn't changed over time is it's the friendly people. I am shocked how often I'm walking around Prince George. It doesn't matter where I am. I could be in downtown, I could be at the dog park, I could be on a trail an hour outside of Prince George, and you never see people walk by without smiling and saying hello. And there's just something about it in Prince George where it's these friendly locals and maybe it's visitors when they're here as well, but they will always look you in the eye, smile, and say hello as you're walking past them. And that's something I don't experience elsewhere. And maybe that's something I'm looking for here because of the nature of my role, but that's something that's the vibe that I get in Prince George, and that's the vibe I hope other people get as well, is that friendly interaction with whoever you're seeing as you're walking on the streets here in Prince George.
I like that. And certainly when you start to get to a population size of 80, 100,000 people in the area, I mean, it's fairly typical to lose that. I mean, if Prince George was 5,000 people, that might not be that out of line to think, yeah, that's what people do in tiny little towns, right? But to get to that level and still have that vibe it does say something about the people who live there.
Yeah, and I think that's how I truly feel, as we're growing and the population base is there, but it still feels like a small community in a lot of ways. And I think that kind of entails that right there.
So you've lived there your whole life. You were away for a bit, but essentially, let's call you lived there your whole life.
Yeah.
Is that pretty typical, or are you seeing more of an influx from what they call the urban escapees or people from other areas moving for a quieter pace of life coming up to Prince George?
Yeah, I think it's honestly it's a little bit of both where I think it's interesting. Definitely a lot more people are staying than previously did, and a lot of credit that is we have two post-secondary institutions now. We've got college, we've also got the university here. That university's relatively new in the last 30 years. So people would leave to go to school and then not necessarily come back previously. So those folks definitely are staying a little bit more frequently. We definitely are seeing those urban individuals, getting out of the big cities into places like Prince George, especially we talked about affordability. Prince George still being one of the more affordable places to live in BC. So we're definitely seeing that. The flip side of that is for a lot of people in the region, they move to Prince George to move to the urban center. So there's this weird dynamic of people that are moving from the lower mainland, like I'm going to go to the small town of Prince George, whereas there's this section of people from the neighboring communities like I'm going to move to the big city of Prince George. And so
That's funny.
It's really how you view the community based on where you're coming from, but it's kind of a funny feel, and definitely seeing both types of those people move into the community and kind of as we're growing.
Yeah, it's all relative. I mean, that's a really interesting perspective. I mean, like I said, probably said this 4 times now. I live in Vancouver, but so I'm thinking, we go up there, quieter, smaller. But then someone who lives, in Hazelton or something like that, it's like, that's the big city, right? Yeah. Like I'm going to the big city now,
Yeah, exactly.
That's fun. What is the urban center of Prince George like from a visitor's perspective? Like, what can you expect from hanging out in downtown Prince George or the communities in Prince George within the city itself that might be surprising to people?
I'll be honest. Like most communities in Canada and North America right now, and frankly across the world, there are some social issues that are taking place within downtown Prince George that are, a variety of reasons and things happening. But there are issues, I would say, currently, if you were walking around downtown Prince George, you're going to see, individuals that are underhoused.
Hmm.
That's where the services are. That's where they're being forced to live at the time. So there's definitely a piece of that. What I will say, and again, I mentioned the visitor information center is kind of right in the heart of downtown.
Hmm.
Those communities are people that we interact with on a daily basis, and those are unbelievably kind and thoughtful people that we are dealing with on a daily basis, and are amazing. Even, I would say, like, they're great for the community. They're advocates for the community. They are experiencing extremely difficult times right now. So,
Hmm.
that's something you're going to see in downtown Prince George, but it's not a scary place. These are individuals that are, going through an extremely tough time for a variety of different reasons.
Hmm.
But I would say have been extremely pleasant to deal with from a visitor perspective, and I mean helpful even, for visitors on occasions too. So that's definitely happening. I think the other piece of downtown that we're seeing right now, and it's shifting a little bit, but it's still, the downtown is still where you're going to find the little local mom and pop shops that are locally owned and provide that
Mm.
authentic experience. And I think whether that's retail, whether that's restaurant, even, professional services, if you need something like that while you're in a community, those ones downtown, that's what you're gonna get when you're walking around downtown. And I think that's when you get the true, experience of Prince George as well, and the people of Prince George.
So the downtown core is still a very, is it a walkable kind of downtown where you could, go shop to shop rather than sort of maybe you're referring to on the outskirts is where you might find the big box stores, things like that. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if
Yeah.
you're
Okay.
if you're staying in the downtown, we like to say there's about 850 hotel rooms within walking distance of the visitor center, and within
Wow.
walking distance of the visitor center as well, hundreds of retail stores, restaurants, all these different stores as well. So I mean, there's probably a 6 or 7 block radius grid of a lot of these places within downtown that is very walkable. And farmers market there on weekends, and lots of events happening there throughout the summer months especially, but in the winter as well. So that's a pretty positive place. And if you're happen to be in Prince George, like, you can walk around and you'll find a very unique or cool local store, or possibly an event depending on what's happening as well. So definitely walkable to access that sort of stuff.
And how about bikeable?
Yeah, interesting. I think, as a northern community, much like other northern communities, our biking season is short.
Fair enough.
But,
Fair enough.
but no, I think from a cyclist perspective, it is friendly for bikes for sure. I think
Hmm.
what you'll find is the majority of people here travel by car, partially due to the winters, partially due to some of the other infrastructure kind of challenges, or where people live within the community. Definitely more of a car-centric community, but I think, cyclists, you see them all over the place. They're definitely traveling and commuting that way. They're experiencing different things and visiting different ways that way as well. So definitely bikeable. You just probably got to come at the right time of year for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair enough. If you're listening to this from an abroad location, check the weather. January, maybe not so much. Fat biking, maybe.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Fat biking, you can definitely do that year round. And really cool partnership with the Prince George Cycling Club, and the up near the university, where they maintain some fat biking trails throughout the winter that are phenomenal. And again, underutilized when you compare them to other trail networks within BC. So, quiet and but very well maintained, and pretty unbelievable.
Fat biking is something I'm very jealous of living in Vancouver because it feels like in the winter it's such a growing sport everywhere. But here, everywhere but southwestern BC, like when nobody does it out here, basically because to get into the snow, essentially you have to go up in the mountains, and then it's just too hard, frankly. But I've been to other snowy destinations. But are you seeing that as a growth sport in your community?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that, it's huge. It definitely becoming extremely popular. We've got a couple of fantastic local bike shops that could probably provide more insight into that. But it's
Hmm.
definitely growing. We're seeing more of it. Coming winter of 2025, we're doing a little marketing campaign to focus on fat biking and really push Prince George as an
Cool.
option for that. The struggle on the visitor side is just the infrastructure for visitors is we don't have any fat bike rentals in Prince George. So that's the
Mm.
interesting kind of difficult aspect of that at the moment. If you've got a fat bike and you're looking to travel to Prince George, awesome. Would definitely encourage that. If you want to try fat biking, it's going to be a little bit trickier, and we're working with some of our partners and stuff to try to get some rentals. But that's a gap we currently have right now.
Sounds like an opportunity for anyone who wants to open a fat bike rental shop in Prince George. So that's a challenge. You mentioned a couple other challenges, but what are some of the challenges you're really working at overcoming from a tourism perspective?
So I think one of the challenges that we've kind of struggled with a lot as a community over the years is perception challenge. And honestly, that probably comes from our residents more than from elsewhere. But I can vividly
Mm,
remember more than a decade ago, there was Elton John was playing in Prince George, and he was doing a worldwide tour, and I think he skipped over most
right.
communities in BC, but was playing a show in Prince George. And a Vancouver radio station had a contest for a giveaway, and they called Prince George the armpit of BC. And I think
Ooh,
that
that's not very
really
nice.
not very nice. But I think like that's something that I think we've been dealing with a lot as a community over the last probably forever. Is this perception, this negative stigma around the community for a variety of reasons, whether it's weather related, oh, it's winter 9 months a year up there, or whatever the problem may be. But
Mm,
I think that's something that we really are seeing more as an opportunity, frankly, lately, and really kind of seeing that start to shift, and people seeing us more as a destination for leisure travel, or as an opportunity to host their conference or their sport event. And I think that's something that's definitely shifting a little bit lately, but definitely still something that we're dealing with as a big challenge, is that perception. And I think where and I know a lot of the other tourism organizations are doing this as well. We're not alone in this, but we're really putting a lot of effort into trying to sell Prince George to Prince George locals, because
hmm.
those are people who live here. They have friends and family elsewhere. We want them to come bring their friends and family here to visit rather than always going away to see them. We want them when they're on holidays to talk to the people they're meeting and be like, oh, I live in Prince George. Like, it's actually a great place to live, great place to visit too. We got mountain biking, we got hiking, we got all this great outdoor stuff. We got all these great shops and restaurants, museums. We want the locals to be proud, so that when they're talking anywhere, that is coming back as well. Because I think that's probably the bigger issue we've always had, is that
Mm.
when our local residents are going away, or even when they're interacting with visitors within the community, like, what are you doing here? Why would you ever spend time here? And they'll be like, then the visitor probably is more knowledgeable about the community than the local. And I think that's the issue that we're trying to combat right now, and definitely has seen some growth in that over the years, but still a long ways to go.
That's a really interesting strategy. Yeah, I definitely know what you're saying perception wise. Some people might have it burnt into their head that it's like, oh, the logging town, that northern BC logging town or whatever. But yeah, I see that changing. But really interesting that you're going after locals to get them as advocates, because what better advocate could there be, right, than someone who lives there? It's one thing for someone to say, hey, they popped in there for a weekend and did a cool bike ride, but for someone who's lived there 10 years to know about it. So what's the most surprising thing? What if someone were to think, like, what's the thing that they just really would not expect, or is there one?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, probably a variety of different things. Like, a couple of the things that I hear, and maybe nothing surprises me now. I'm born and raised here. Like, this
Hmm.
is where so nothing can surprise me. But I think when I talk to visitors, a few of the things that I hear that they're always surprised about, and like I mentioned one, it's the
Mm.
friendliness of people. That always people are like, wow, I can't believe how friendly people were. I was walking by on a trail and they're like, hey, good morning, how you doing? That's one. The food scene
Okay.
is another one. People are blown away with the level of culinary experience that we offer in Prince George.
See, that's my bias right there, because I didn't expect you to say
Yeah.
that. I have obviously a perception issue right there. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, we have some fantastic locally owned restaurants in Prince George that do a phenomenal job of creating unique dishes, unique sort of pairings. I mentioned like like some of them doing like farm to table type stuff or sourcing ingredients locally. Some really, really cool food options in Prince George that I think always surprise people when they are
Mm-hmm.
visiting if they're not coming in expecting that. So that's definitely one there that I would say for sure. And I think the other one that always surprises people is the access. Like we talked about the geography.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a vehicle, yeah, it's 6 hours north of Kamloops, so we're 8.5 hour drive maybe from Vancouver, probably about an 8 hour
Mm-hmm.
drive from Edmonton from those centers. But we have 6, 7 flights daily from Vancouver to Prince George direct, and they're an hour flight, and then you're 10 minutes to get from the airport to downtown Prince George. Like it's very accessible if you're thinking about it in different ways or are flying up or different things like that. So I think that's always one of those things where people are like, oh, well, it's just so far. Like I couldn't possibly go there for
Mm-hmm.
a conference. And it's like, it's actually like really easy and typically pretty affordable to fly here. And lots of different flight options, multiple airline carriers that are in here all the time. So the access is actually surprises people often as well.
But the food scene is really interesting to me because I will circle around on that. I do find, and again, I hate to get into bashing anyone else, so I'm not going to name any names. But there's oftentimes you go to a small town and it's like you've got all these cool things to do, and then you go to like the best restaurant in town, and it's like not that great. So that's a strong differentiator there for sure. That you could expect to have a really nice meal, once or twice or every night, I suppose, if you want while you're visiting.
Yeah, and maybe I'll name a couple, but I don't want to try to name too many and then feel like I'm forgetting any. But if we're talking about like walking distance from this downtown, right near all the hotels, right near the visitor center, right near the conference center, Nancy O's Batula Burning, White Goose Bistro, Twisted Cork, Crossroads, Black Clover, Ivy's Kitchen, all within a 3 block radius are all phenomenal
Wow.
local restaurants. And I know I
And
forgot
they
a
have
couple
cool
there.
names too.
And cool names too, yeah. And I definitely forgot a couple there, so maybe I'll get a little slap on the wrist from some restaurant owner. But just off the top of my head,
Yeah.
within a 3 block radius, some fantastic options right there.
Circling back to talking to the locals. So Tourism Prince George has a podcast.
We do.
Tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast is called The Take on Prince George, and it's really interviewing a local that is an expert in something that visitors can do or something that visitors might be interested in. So, we spend a lot of time talking about mountain biking, outdoor activities. So we've got podcasts with, one of the local bike shop owners who's the president of the Prince George Cycling Club. He came on and talked about the mountain biking in Prince George. We talked about fat biking. We've had one of the cycling club members who's responsible for fat biking come on and talk about fat biking. Talking about the culinary scene with a local foodie who's got a large Instagram following here in Prince George. Talking about the food scene, talking about the downtown, talking about the arts and culture scene. So definitely, we're always bringing on a local expert and then asking them to share their kind of expertise and knowledge on a specific topic, and then kind of putting that out as just another way that we can market Prince George in a unique opportunity. So each podcast episode usually is associated with a blog post and usually kind of has a small marketing campaign to kind of attract whatever that topic is associated with it. But it's been a really fun experience. It gets me the opportunity to talk to some locals and get to know them a little bit better, get to know the industry a little bit better, whatever they're passionate about, whatever they're doing. So that's been a really fun project, and we're over a year into it now, and yeah, we've released I think we released an episode monthly. So we've released 13 episodes now, and gonna continue to release them for the next little while here at least. As it's been a lot of fun and pretty successful.
Podcasting is fun, isn't it?
It is.
I love it. We'll link to that from our website too, so people can check that out. So hopefully someone's listening to this. We're getting to this point, and they're thinking, I should go check out Prince George. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I made back to that sales pitch earlier. Like if you're listening to this and especially if you're from BC or Western Canada and you haven't been here before or you haven't been here in a long time, it's worth a trip. I think that's one of those things where we are not the traditional thought, and I think that's a lot of the appeal. If you've done
Mm-hmm.
the typical visitor trip in the last couple of years, consider Prince George. It's going to be different. It's off the beaten track a little bit, but it's going to be something that's a different experience, and it's going to be authentic and unique, that you'll experience here. So give us a go, and yeah, come check out our website, tourismpg.com. Check us out on social media, and definitely that should help with the inspiration as well.
One more question for you. Who is Mr. PG?
Very good question. Mr. PG. So this is the local celebrity, I guess, of Prince George, but he's the unofficial town mascot, although he is a City of Prince George trademark. He currently stands at the intersection of Highway 97 and 16, right at the crossroads of the two major highways in Prince George. He's a 27-foot tall statue of a lumber type mascot. He's got a really interesting history on how he started. Mr. PG was originally built actually in 1960, and there was a permanent location in front of the Simon Fraser Hotel in Prince George, which no longer exists. That hotel doesn't exist. And then there was a traveling version of Mr. PG that was built for the Kelowna Regatta and the PNE opening parade in 1961. So took part in the Grey Cup parade in 1963, this traveling mascot of Prince George. So there's a really kind of unique history, bunch of different moves throughout Prince George, bunch of different iterations of Mr. PG, a wood version. Now he's like a fiberglass version that's not going to decay over time. And he's been in his current location since about the early 2000s. But if you're really interested about Mr. PG, the Exploration Place Museum in Prince George has a whole exhibit on his history. Really interesting. He's a fun little character for Prince George. The visitor center, we sell Mr. PG socks and t-shirts and pins and all that fun stuff as well. So it's definitely something that people are very proud of in Prince George, and it's kind of a fun little quirk of our community.
I love roadside attractions like that, and Canada is so full of them. There's just such great ones all across the country, and if you're interested in that kind of roadside Canadiana, Mr. PG is one more element to your trip for sure. Well, Colin, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything we didn't cover, anything you'd like to mention to our listeners?
No, thanks so much for having me, David. Really appreciate it. I think that the only thing we've said it before, but just consider Prince George for your next trip. Check out our website, check out our social media channels. I think that it's not a trip you would regret taking.
For sure. Well, you've got an advocate in me, because I'm stoked and I want to go up there ASAP now, because pretty much everything you said has resonated with me, and I bet you it will resonate with our listeners and the readers of the magazine too. So thanks a lot, Colin.
Thanks, David.
You're going to Prince George, like that northern BC logging town? Why? This is the stereotype we're bucking today. Yeah, it's a town built on industry. Yeah, it's in northern BC. But just as tourism destinations like Golden were once only known as railroad towns, or Squamish was once just a logging town, Prince George is a destination on the rise. Epic biking, deep powder, quiet trails through towering trees, great food, affordable accommodations. It's all there in this place that you might not have expected. Check it out. I know I will. I'm booking a winter stay up there as we speak. Maybe I'll see you on the slopes. Although I probably won't, right? And that's the beauty of Prince George. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm David Webb, and hey, live the adventure.